Yeah. So if you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask.
Uh, Hello, am I
Yeah.
audible?
Yes, yes, Anupam.
I should come online as well. Can you see me, hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Sukrita. I'm a big fan of your writing and have engaged with your critical work on Ismat Chittai in one of my recent most works. And I'm actually looking at your recent book on Krishna Sokti with great delight. It's a wonderfully conceived writer in context series. So hats off. It's the old case study style of writing, which was so useful to us when I was an undergraduate and a postgraduate student in Delhi University. And somewhere along the line, the whole case study approach where you look at a writer in context fell down the post-structuralist drain, as it were. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad that the series is, reviving writers fully in their historical and material and textual context, and that the work on Sokti in particular is very timely. So I wanted to say that very quickly as a personal
Thank you.
note of gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you. Mhm.
And I was listening with delight to the ways in which you were parsing the different roles of writer, translator, and editor. It's three roles that I myself perform, and it's a constant form of jugglery. All the while, you try to train your ego to take a back seat, to listen, to observe, to think. My question is maybe cognate on the lines of what you were saying, and I hope
Mhm.
I'll not take too much of everyone's time. But and pardon me if I come across as confused, because it's actually a confusing question and a situation. Sometimes, Sukrita, I find that women's writing and young women's writing, middle-aged women's writing, so it's not an age thing, but women's writing in general tends to be very occupied with certain themes, which which say the domestic sphere and relationships, especially heterosexual relationships. Of late, many homosexual relationships or lesbian relationships. But in general, we, there is stuff called women's literature, or there are a set of themes that come, in a kind of cyclical way in various and as editor and translator, I continuously come across new writing that sort of works around these themes. I myself do not have a problem with the theme per se, and I'm often looking for style or craft or issues of modernity, especially in terms of the form, even where the writing is going down a well-trodden path, say that of the short story. Uh, but on the other hand, we have a world that is still, transiently patriarchal, run around male values, and where the greatest of writing, often is falls back into structurally male themes, uh, and women's writings tend to, I think, become a handmaiden. Huh? To these global, quote unquote, global or universal themes that remain largely male in their value system and in their scale of what is valuable or great writing. Hmm. Occasionally, you will have a Softy or a George Eliot, in English, or an Olga Tokarczuk. These are writers, who play down, I think, the domesticity of their themes in order to play up and as a result, immediately the global acclaim goes very high. Now, as a writer, as an editor, and as a teacher, I find myself being in the split role of encouraging young girls to keep writing, to write their immediate lives, their immediate realities, and at the same time, ask them to read the very best in the tradition, knowing fully well that often the very best in the tradition is shaped by a value system that might be very alien to the women and their immediate realities. So I was wondering if you have had this long stellar career and transnational career really, from Africa to India and so on, and surely like these questions of scale and ambition on the one hand and relatability to one's immediate reality, do they turn up in your own life and in your own career? Have they turned up as a kind of contradiction? And have women writers in particular been, casualty to such contradictions?
Yeah. I think this is a wonderful question because it also really ties up with what I'm trying to do, isn't it, in writer in
Yeah,
context? This
yeah.
is exactly what we are trying to do because one does see that in these series. And if you notice that in these series that I've worked out in particular, there are very formidable women writers. We have Amrita Preetham, we have
Mm,
Mahashweta Devi, we have, of course, Krishna Sopti, writers of this category, people who are dynamic and have not bothered about what we call market strategies, being fashionable in writing devices or, innovating styles for the sake of new styles, etc., etc. So these are people who, and to me, the word conviction matters, but also they have become like icons for a reason, and that is because while they were very conscious of tradition, they were
mm,
also countering tradition, right? They were also really questioning tradition all the time. And I think that is the beauty of these writers, because while the place for the new gets created, the
mm,
foundation is tradition because there's something to react to, right?
mm,
And I think this is what is seen as a kind of, in every language we have writers like this, in our country. And that
mm,
is why I think we need to give a lot of importance to them, because
mm,
while immediate reality, in fact, it's not even immediate. What they see is how they got, people are trying to box them, whether critically
mm,
or domestically or in whatever fashion. They get trying, people are trying to box them into tradition, sometimes also condemning them for it, right?
mm,
But condemning them for the fact that they are not traditional writers, not
mm,
saying it in as many words, but not following tradition, let me put it like that. But
mm,
that's why, if you notice my Krishna Sopti book, the title is Counter Archive. It is a
mm, mm,
counter archive.
mm,
So we have to see that new writing, particularly in the context of women,
mm,
and now we are also talking about, as you rightly said, queer literature. In queer literature, also something like that is happening. The formidability of that writing is there because, yes, there is cognition being given to another kind of sexuality, and that sexuality has existed forever, and yet we are talking about as though it has suddenly cropped up from somewhere.
mm,
It has not. And that is the, in fact, that is for one small reason why, it's a big reason, but that is one of the things that I like in T.S. Eliot when he talks about tradition and
tradition and the individual talent.
talent.
Yeah,
This is exactly what it is, in
exactly.
women's writings. And all these women did not want to be slotted as feminists. It's very surprising because, the moment you say feminist, you're basically using the same stroke for everyone. There is so much of diversity from within that. And
Mm,
so, of course, there are kinds and kinds of, today we have a very sophisticated theoretical premise for feminisms,
mm,
There we have it. But I'm talking about modern literature, which is
mm,
post-independence writing. So though there was a lot of reaction
mm,
to tradition, but it was a reaction to something, and therefore a creation of a new something, right?
mm, mm,
So I think that dynamism one has to keep recognizing, and as very uh, as a kind of critical alertness that is required to spot new talent, and to give them the base as well, to offer to them something like this, that in
mm,
your language Marshweta Devi existed, you know
mhm.
and so she's as relevant today as she was yesterday, right?
Yep.
And so today you have to make yourself as relevant as her and
Mm,
of the future. So
mm,
one step further, so that
mm,
dynamism that you see. Now, I see that in our country, and I'm coming back to Sri Devi just in case you are getting anxious about why we are not coming to editing. This is where an editor also plays a role. In
mm.
our country, we do not have fiction editors. Remember that. because the fiction writer is the last word normally, right? Whatever he writes or she writes is the last word, and the publisher would not, beyond a point, not get into it, the text itself. But, progressive thinking tells us, progressive in the literal sense I'm talking about, it tells us, today's world tells us, that the writer has a very significant role to play, because the writer might tweak it a little and give it a direction which the text is demanding. It is demanding that a vision be articulated. The writer has a vision, but it's not, maybe because there is some caution that is being exercised. And sometimes the caution is just this, that the editor, that I may not be accepted by the publisher.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes this point also, that I may not be, if I say something very radically different, I may not be accepted, but I want to get published. So sometimes, even if the publisher is not giving you that kind of a feedback, or an editor, then you need to sometimes locate the right editor for yourself, even as a fiction artist.
Yes.
Or sometimes, somebody like you who is very alert about these questions, then you would tell your younger writers, or even your colleagues, or whoever is writing. Because the writing age, even at age 75, you may be a new writer, right?
Of course.
So you need somebody, you need that. I like to refer to the editor as the third eye. Let me go back to that. So that eye is required, because, as I say somewhere else, you need to detach yourself from the text altogether to be able to have a third eye,
Right.
to be able to be your own editor. And that's very difficult. It's very
Mm.
difficult, because we are in love with ourselves as writers, mostly. You know, we love our words, we love to we do not want to wrench ourselves away from it. That's why there are writers. I mean, I've started doing that. When I write a poem, I just put it in cold storage.
Mm.
Immediately, I don't want to publish it. And then I take some time. And when I go back to it, I myself become a better editor
Naturally,
in
yes.
my poetry. And because I have developed a detachment by that time. Initially, I'm so attached to it that it's like your baby. You cannot say the baby has gone wrong anywhere. You might say don't do it, but let anybody else say that, you will hate it, right? Because you're so protective of your baby. So it's that
Mm.
kind of attachment when you create something. And you need another person then to help you. And that person may be within yourself, provided that you create that atmosphere from within. So tradition and the movement to the new and the reaction to the tradition, it's actually all one for new writing.
Mm. Mm.
That's the point I'm trying to make, right?
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anupama, for that question. And yeah, there is Jai Narayan has raised a hand. Please go ahead.